Hello again, whiskey friends. Thanks for joining everybody for another whiskey review. And today we're going to go over a new brand that caught my eye. Though when it comes to the source of this whiskey, it is a familiar source, though a new label. But today, well, I guess we should say tonight, we're getting into Archer Eland. And this is the cashmere version of this expression, a rye whiskey aged 7 years old. That's 126 proof in this sexy blue bottle. We'll get into more details about this whiskey, and in the end, give it a grade and see if it's something that you should be checking out. So thank you for joining today, whiskey friends. Let's kick off the show. All right. I'm actually out here about to do a barrel pick selection. And I came out here early and I was like, you know what? We can get a review in for this week. Why not? Especially, I've been excited to get into this rye whiskey here. Hey, we're going to pour this into an independent Joe glass today. Cheers to Joe. All right, so let's pour this thing out. We'll let it air out a bit, given that I've got a few more details I want to go over here. Now, I had a preview pour of this myself. There's actually quite a bit gone in the bottle because I've been sampling it out as well. So Todd over there at the Bourbon Road podcast, can't wait to hear what you think of this whiskey. Now again, let's put this bottle up here. Brand name is Archer Eland. Now I've managed not to set myself up for very much success here in this darkness. Okay, now I can see it. Archer Eland is a bold yet graceful American rye whiskey brought to life with Ohio's exquisite rye grain curated in small batches. This is a homage to my mother, a tenacious maverick whose strength, conviction, and refined spirit shape not only me, but the soul of this bottle. And to the curious, the discerning, and the ones unbound by convention, this bottle was made for you too. May it meet you in your moments of reflection, ambition, and life's sacred snapshots. Well, it's actually got a pretty good story on the back. Also says distilled and aged in Columbus, Ohio, which is a clear indicator that this is coming out of Middle West Spirit. So from what I can find online, this is a new brand. It launched at the end of 2025, is flowing through Middle West, though founded and blended by Wendy Pevich. Now, she looks like a new personality on the scene. She's got quite a bit on social medias, but sounds like she's a former nurse practitioner who then got into whiskey all the way up to the point where she's making her own brand. Pretty interesting to try out, and she managed to get 7-year barrels from Middle West. I'd be intrigued to get further into this story, honestly. I got to do some more research here. Mash bill on this is a 95.5 rye. So I love the pumpernickel rye from Middle West, but I don't know if I've had a 95.5 rye coming out of Middle West. So this mash bill might be my first introduction, something from Middle West with the 95.5 mash bill. And I saw a bunch of other expressions of this online. I came across the cashmere, and I mainly picked up this one because it was 126 proof. Picked this up in Ohio for around $80. And there were other expressions on the shelf. A lower proof Aurora and Solstice. And those were around $65. Those were about 100, 105 proof. You know, and the thing that did catch my eye on the shelf was this bottle. You know, I do kind of hate these fully painted bottles because you just never know how much whiskey is actually left in it. But it was eye-catching. You know, it reminded me more of like a Scotch bottle coming out of Brooklotte than something like coming out of Ohio. But when I did see it was Middle West and Ohio and all that kind of stats, that's what sold me on it immediately. Like, oh, this is a Middle West rye. Sweet. Totally getting into that. So let's get into the review here. We'll get into the nose, the palate, talk about how this thing tastes, and ultimately give it a score by the end. Nice and viscous already, though. I mean, look at that. Coats the glass very, very, very well. Beautiful color there, too. I know it's dark, but it's got a nice, nice color there for a 7-year rye. All right, into the nose we go. Let's have some late night fun, everybody. Cheers. Oh, the nose is like this beautiful blend of spice and fruit right off the bat. Yeah, plenty of baking spice there. Leans a bit more into even a cinnamon for me. But amongst all that, it's got those full baking spices. I think that was lightning. That is not good. It better not rain on me after I got this all set up. Nice oak. Little bit of like a powdered sugar kind of a sensation there. And then the fruit range. It's actually got kind of a dynamic fruit range, mostly in an apples to a stewed apple route, but I was getting some red fruits in there as well. More akin to a berry, even a raspberry. So it's got an interesting range there between its spice profile, the oak, and the dynamic range of the fruits. Dig in the nose. I'm excited to get into this here. Honestly, I can't remember based off of my preview 2 weeks ago, really what this flavor profile was like off the neck pour. So this is kind of like a fresh experience for me going through it live with you. All right. Cheers, everybody. Let's get into the front palate. Real nice, really nice mouthfeel on this one. Does lean in up front into those apples, even getting to the point where you're not only getting the flesh of the apple, but the skin of the apple. And it's got that oak and baking spice profile right there, right off the start. Then that transition to mid palate. Honestly, the transition to the finish is interesting too. But that transition to the mid palate is interesting. It actually brightens up a little bit, like that oak profile lets go on that transition to mid palate and brings in a brighter wave of the fruits and the spice. And I am getting a little bit of that raspberry mixed in. So it matches the nose quite well. And while it brightens up and brings the sweetness mid palate, the transition back into the finish then brings back the apple, the oak, and the heavy baking spice. Doesn't have a stereotypical rye kick, maybe until the tail end of the finish where I'm starting to get into something that feels a bit more clean and cleansely, like a rind of a lemon even, kind of lingering on the back of the palate. I really like how the finish comes together on this one. It just has this like initial impression that it leaves you that it's going to be kind of a loud rye. And then when it switches to the more soft sweetness of the mid palate, but then really turns up the volume at the end. It's kind of like that moment in an orchestra where everyone's playing these individual instruments, but then they all start building and then they just come together. The finish really is the highlight on this one. And you could really let this one sit for quite a bit. As it has that transition, even at the finish, from what I was describing as the apples, the raspberries, the baking spices, into more of that brighter citrus, lemon rind, cleanliness, and more of that rye grain begins to stick out as well. Let's see how this one did in the final scores. So here on the channel, we do have a robust scoring system comprised of a flavor score, an experience score, and a value score. Aggregate all of those scores together, and you can see how this whiskey compares to other whiskeys. And this one grades out at a very solid 86 on this one. A very good buy, considering I didn't know what I was going to get myself into going into this. Being a fan of Middle West, seeing the age statement and the proof, though, really did bring this package together. But it was that bottle that caught my eye the most. I guess the only other thing I'll say on that, too, when it does come to a rye whiskey, you're buying an Ohio rye whiskey. It does have a little bit of a craftiness to it. So I think this one is more in the court for those that do like to experience whiskeys from different states, different profiles. But if you want to see what Ohio has to offer, I think this is actually a pretty good Ohio expression. All right, here's the bottle again so you can see it one last time. So if you've had this, let me know what you think of it in the comments. And just remember, while you can always have more whiskey, you can never have enough whiskey friends. So take care of those around you, and we will catch you on the next one. Goodbye, everybody.